Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Kirkpatrick.
And my name is Ty Whitman.
And we're the hosts of the Beyond the Narthex podcast.
A show where we sit down with members of CK Press and go beyond our narthex and take a deeper dive into the lives of our church family.
Our hope is that each episode will cultivate and encourage new conversations for you, our listeners, with our guests.
Enjoy the episode.
Around, not so much Kitsap, but a little farther north, my great-grandparents both owned a farm just outside of Port Townsend.
Huh.
So my mom's parents, basically. Mm-hmm. And he, great-grandfather, was an immigrant from Germany. And his wife, apparently, I have less information about her, but I do know that she was an immigrant from Denmark.
Huh.
And so I have roots, my family roots, at least on that side of the family, go way back here. And my mom used to tell me that her mom used to come down here. This is back, 1940s and 30s and stuff. And the main things that she would do is that they would pick blueberries. Because this is just a really good area for blueberries.
Really?
Yeah, just climate-wise and the type of soil, of course, and stuff. So apparently it's a really good place for it. So we ended up here, and now I was born in Oregon, but Jody, of course, born and raised in Washington, and both my daughters are Washingtonians. And so I've been fully adopted into the Washington.
Yes.
That's great.
I guess you guys are probably both from Washington.
Yes.
So less significant for you, but
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was born in Massachusetts, but I'm Washington.
well, yeah.
I
When did you guys move here?
I was like 1.5, so
Okay.
I'm Washington.
Long time ago.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I think that's yeah.
True Pacific Northwest.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, my dad was in the Marine Corps, so we moved around a lot.
Okay.
And really wasn't until I graduated from high school that I moved up here and went to college at Seattle Pacific. And basically I've been here since 1972. So.
Did you meet Jody there at SPU?
No, actually, after I graduated from Seattle Pacific, I got an apartment up on Capitol Hill in Seattle, and it was, I tell this to my daughters now and they both are aghast, $150 a month.
Wow, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And anyway, but I had a roommate, and my roommate had a girlfriend, and the girlfriend had a friend Jody. And anyway, and there's a long sordid story that goes in with that, but sordid maybe not be the right word, but it's a long story, but let it nearly be said that I got to know Jody via my roommate, and she and I both attended the University of Washington at the same time.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow. She wouldn't have, I don't know if she would have gone to Seattle Pacific or not. I know she had a friend who at least went there briefly.
Okay. Wait, so University of Washington was after SPU?
Yeah, I did 4 years, 4 years at Seattle Pacific, and I got my bachelor's in classical languages, and then took a year, not even quite a year off, I guess. But anyway, I went back to the University of Washington, pursued further studies, primarily in German, but also a little bit of review in Latin, and then also started studying some Danish. Danish, yeah.
All at the same time? Does your brain handle all of that well, and that's when you discovered languages are neat.
No, well, when I was at Seattle Pacific, it was kind of interesting. It was just totally by luck, sure, why not? I didn't make it to the original time for my registration for Seattle Pacific, which was, I was living down in Southern California.
Wow.
And so they said, yeah, you're going to have to register when you get back up there, when classes start or before classes start. So got up, and of course by then, almost all the classes were taken that could be, most everybody else would take their freshman year, except Greek. And
No way.
So I said, okay, well, I'll take Greek, and that's okay with me. And so I ended up taking Greek, and I basically took it every year. Really, I think it was my senior year. I think I had one trimester in my senior year, but other than that, every other trimester there at Seattle Pacific, I had Greek.
Wow.
And I did some Latin as well.
Was it Koine Greek, or did you learn
Yeah,
more
yeah,
modern
Koine.
Greek?
No, it's Koine. Yeah.
Can you explain what's the difference with
Koine is the
biblical?
basic. Yeah, it's what the New Testament was written
Okay,
in,
we're
but
speaking.
the more basic, common Greek is what Koine means.
Mhm.
So.
That's
And
right.
then for the listeners, so could you speak it, or it's very different, right? You only read it, right?
Our training, my training, I should be careful when I say that. My training was more of a traditional classical learning of being able to translate.
Okay.
We didn't work on speaking it because
I mean, you
it's
don't
not a
speak it.
spoken language
Yeah.
to speak of.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a really interesting story. I don't know if you've ever heard. Let's see, what's it called? It's a story. It's a good story. I read it. Anyway, there's this guy who's this Italian captain, and he gets stationed during World War II in Greece. And it turns out that there's a number of people who are trying to infiltrate German-occupied Greece, just to, of course, to build up a resistance movement. And apparently, this one Greek citizen comes across this guy who's just come down out of the sky, and he doesn't know who he is, and he starts talking in Greek, but he starts talking in this really weird Greek that just sounded really old-fashioned. And it turned out that the guy was, in fact, had been infiltrated by the British and had been a classical Greek student. And so he basically spoke, I guess, classical Greek, but classical Greek is a little different than modern Greek.
It is.
You can easily pinpoint. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really know exactly how Koine Greek was even pronounced.
That's right.
Most people pronounce the Erasmian type of Greek, which was kind of coined by Desiderius Erasmus in the late 1400s and early 1500s. So that's kind of the pronunciation that most people learn, but we have no idea. We guess.
Strictly for translating now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Like if we went to Greece and tried to speak Koine Greek, you could maybe get away with it, but but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Apparently, I just learned this yesterday or Monday in Hebrew, because the way that the Hebrew that is often spoken in Israel now is a lot different than biblical Hebrew as well. They actually, but when they came back to Israel, they had to kind of create more modern terms. One of the terms they came up with, this is just kind of cool for rocket, is they took the term chariot and the term fire and made it one word. And so that's their word for rocket. That Old Testament, those two Old Testament words, and they made it one for.
Now I'm just thinking of chariots of fire.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what they call rockets.
For a
apparently.
rocket.
Chariots
Okay.
of fire.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah. So okay. So did you just kind of fall in love with languages?
Yeah.
Pretty immediately.
Yeah. There was, when I was in, what we now call middle school, junior high, I was at a base school at Quantico, Virginia. And my first 7th grade year there, I was in one class. And then the next year, unfortunately, the students who were in the uppermost part of that class went on and took Latin.
Okay.
And I just missed being able to go in that group.
Oh, okay.
So, oh well. 7th and 8th grade, but then starting 9th grade, I was in Southern California again and started studying Spanish. Took 4 years of Spanish in high school, and and then of course went to college and started studying Greek, and then I took Latin, and then I took German, and then I took Danish. And anyway.
So the languages you could converse in right now, I mean, can you list those? Like Spanish, can you get by in Spanish?
I get by in Spanish, German, and English.
And English.
Okay. And you spent the last, I don't know, when you were over in Seattle, you were spending more time learning another language, weren't you?
Oh yeah, that was amazing for treatments, right?
Yeah.
When you were over there. What did
Was
Jody
it? Were
learn?
you going back to Danish, maybe?
Going back to Danish.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm still working. I have my. I can't. There's a lot of things I can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, because Jody doesn't want me coming into contact with germs.
Like physically
Yeah,
right
right.
now, you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, physically, I can do just about anything. To be honest with you, this morning I did my 3-mile workout, and I'm
Oh,
okay
wow.
and stuff like that.
Okay.
But she wants me to be careful about being around people and certain jobs where I would come into contact with bacteria and viruses and
Yeah.
Yeah.
and molds.
Yeah.
And so I'm not allowed to go out and work in the yard, and I'm not allowed to vacuum. I'm not allowed to anything that would really raise up dust. Basically, I can't work on.
Wow, that really shifts your mindset of what is accessible. And how long will that be for?
Until my blood counts get up where they belong. By blood counts, I mean, of course, blood consists of several parts. There's the red cells, and then there's the white cells. Right, the red cells are responsible for carrying the oxygen and food. And so, some point during our discussions today, or some other time, you may see me kind of gasping, and you may say, "Oh no, are you okay?" And I'm just fine. It's just every once in a while, for some reason, my body gets a little behind in carrying the oxygen, and so I need to get that taken care of. But anyway, but then also, the white cells are one of their main responsibilities is protecting the body against invasion from bad things. And so, the treatment that I'm on chemo still.
Okay.
It knocks down the blood count on all my red cells and all my white cells, which sort of seems counterintuitive, but that's what they need to do in order to make sure that those pesky, bad cells that I have that were in my marrow, and hopefully, Lord willing, have been taken care of. Anyway, don't get their way back, but it involves chemo. All that to say.
So was the kind of going back to Danish and spending time in a language that you kind of are familiar with, but maybe hadn't spent time in, was that a good way to kind of escape some of the stuff that you were?
Basically, I'm sorry, I went off on a track and then lost where I was going. Much like with with my girls, set up a schedule, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, during the course of the day, I have a schedule that I try and follow, more or less, a little bit less now these days right now. But anyway, start off with some Greek.
Okay.
Try and work my way through the stuff that you guys are working through in the sermons.
Yeah.
And then after that, I haven't done any German too much to speak of, which is that's the way it goes. But then I do lunch, and then after lunch I do some Duolingo in Danish, and then do some guitar after that to try and build up my resume with my family. Everybody else is amazing musicians, and I'm just, I can do vocal stuff, but nothing like what they can do. Anyway, I do a schedule. Danish is a part of my schedule.
Okay, very cool.
That's where all that is going.
Yeah.
And this is your regimented day right now, or maybe it alternates every day.
Oh, it alternates. It's
Yeah.
not like I feel like I'm not doing something right. If for some reason I end up
not too hard on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I have appointments, and like yesterday, for instance, had to get a blood draw, and so that took first thing, and then because I did that, I couldn't run in the morning, so I ended up running in the afternoon, and anyway.
So how does it work right now for you with visitors and family? Is it pretty closed off, just family, or does that kind of fluctuate too?
It fluctuates to some extent. Although it was kind of fun. My mom, who is now living with my sister down in Phoenix. Okay. And so they came up right around the beginning of March. I finished my 100 days there over in Pete Gross' house and was back over here, but all the cell counts were really low. So they came up, and we didn't wear masks around the house or anything else like that.
Yeah.
And they brought a bug I had never heard of before. It's called para-influenza 1. And so everybody else got over their para-influenza within about 2 weeks. It took me 4 weeks.
Oh, no.
It's kind of like more like just a real bad cold more than anything else. But even so, it was just kind of one of those things.
It just lingered. You got to see them, but people are carriers, aren't we? Dang it.
And that's, it's just one of those things. What can I say?
Yeah.
Jody's out working in the yard or the garden or whatever. I can't go out and help.
And you are, you mentioned running. What, are you long distance then? You said 3 miles.
At least I used to be, yeah.
I feel like I used to see you in Silverdale all the time. I'd be driving to the church, and there you are over by the mall. Yeah. So did you do marathons too? Or
I have done a marathon or 3.
Or 3.
Wow, 3.
Okay.
Wow. What is it about running that is so that you love? You must love it. What do you love about it? What is something?
Several things. Of course, one of the nice things is when you're running, You get to see things that most other folks don't get to see firsthand. They're usually in a car having to go someplace, and I get to go to those places, and I'm there physically. And that especially is the case, like when I've gone, for instance, to Europe and other parts of the country. I get to see things that most other folks don't get to see firsthand, and have to experience it by actually going the distance. The other reason, of course, is because the endorphins that are released after about 20 minutes of working out, my body releases the endorphins, and I get on that runner's high, for lack of a better term. And and then that's really great. And then also, it's my way of basically blowing off steam, and especially as a teacher. By the end of the day, I was ready to be able to run away from my students, and that's what I would do literally, is run away from my students.
Physical space.
Actively.
Yeah. Well, what has that been like? I mean, I feel like, goodness, we just dove right in. We didn't even introduce Al at the start of this podcast.
We just started. That's all right.
We can do that later. But I know the congregation knows you, but essentially for those of us that don't know you as well, what did you teach? You retired. Can you explain that transition of teaching, then retirement, and then right into where you are now,
Yeah, I was a teacher for, depends on how you want to count it, 35 or 36 years. Full-time, 35. 36 years full-time. And then that would have been 37 with any kind of substituting I did. And then 33, the last 33 of those years, the final 33 of those years, I spent at North Mason High School, North Mason School District, and taught just about, well, not everything, gotta be careful how I say that, any of the humanities basically, foreign language, English, history. I did some classes where I taught basic computer skills. I mean, computers like as in putting them together, taking them apart, and stuff like that. Excuse me. So those are the things that I taught there. It was very difficult. It's kind of funny, I submitted my letter of resignation for finishing up my time as a teacher with North Mason anyway. I did that in December of 21, I'm pretty sure, December 21. And then went in for a blood test in January before I went back to school. And that's where the reason why I did that is because of the fact that I was feeling like my body, even though I was training, I was not really getting a real, my body wasn't learning how to deal with being an oxygen debt. And so I went in, got a blood test, and it turned out that's when we discovered that I did have cancer before. You guys probably knew that. Chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which is not good, but if, as my sister once put it, if you got to have cancer, it's a cancer to have. Anyway, explain that later. But we learned then that the CLL, the chronic lymphocytic leukemia, because of the treatment that I had gotten in about 2013, 2013-14, had caused some of my cells to mutate. And so that's when we learned that I had myeloid dysplasia syndrome. And if that's when we learned that if I did not go through with the blood transplant, so stem cell transplant, I should say, I would have about a year and a half to live. So.
And then that started in January? Is that
that January of 22. And then started getting in the process. So basically, I turned in. Sorry, thank you for bringing me back to the main point. Turned in my resignation. Well, try and stay on a track, but sometimes I get off. Anyway, turned in my resignation in December of 21. January of 22, I came back in and told my principal that I would be going on medical leave starting the end of the second trimester. That is to say, right around March. And so I actually retired. I came out as a retired teacher. It would have been a year ago, September. But I actually finished my teaching in March of 22. And so then started the whole process of getting ready for the transplant, which was amazing. Yeah, and yeah, and see, what's been hard is, and I know that people who retire learn this stuff firsthand, and so anybody who's retired knows this already, so it's no surprise. But you know, you don't really understand completely what's involved in the transition from moving between being a teacher, where basically, you know, at least for 9 months during the course of the year, I'm focused in on my job and just teaching, and that's all I do and think about. And now all of a sudden, I don't have that. And so the transition in some respects was, how shall I say, helped maybe to some extent, because the transplant became such an overwhelming process that I didn't really have much time to think about exactly, anyway, what was happening insofar as the retirement is concerned. But it also brought on new things that I anyway.
It's all encompassing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put. Yeah.
Yeah.
It basically, and not just for me, but also for Jody, because
Right.
she was the one who's been taking care of me and has been stuck with me, literally for 100 days. You know, folks at Fred Hutch said that, you got to have somebody with him 24/7.
Okay.
And so, you know, she took 1 or 2 days, I think, but by and large, she was there with me the whole time.
Wow.
Except when I went in the hospital about 10 days after the transplant, and I was in there for 13 days in the hospital. So she had some time to herself in that regard, but even then she was still coming to the hospital and seeing me and stuff like that. So it's all that to say that the changeover from being a teacher to not being a teacher has been odd, and I still have not completed that particular process, not by a long shot.
Right.
I mean, so today's the first day of school. I know people watching this, it won't be. School will be in full swing.
What's today's date? September
Today's September
6th.
6th.
Yep, that's right.
2023, yep.
So do you find that right around, maybe like a couple of weeks before now, your body still has that kind of mode where it's starting to, it feels like it needs to start to gear up? Like school's coming.
Go mode.
You still have that kind of, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
33 years of that being
That's right.
imprinted in your brain.
That's right. No, you got it. You hit the nail right on the head. You know, of course, last year, last September was when my retirement came through.
Right.
And so theoretically, that would have been my first September where school started.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But that also was when the transplant happened. And
Yeah.
I was just, I was in Netherland. Anyway, but yeah, this week really has been my first week where I've actually had an opportunity to look at the transition, not going to the transition of starting of school.
Yeah. Has that been hard to digest, and kind of just let it sink in that you're not going to school and you don't have something else that's kind of taking up the transplant's not happening, so there's that. Has that been hard or it's just strange?
It's strange. That might be a better term. You know, everybody when they retire has to go through a process.
Right.
I'm sure. I'm speaking for folks in general, and maybe shouldn't, but I'm sure that most folks, anyway, as they go through the process of retirement, you figure, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
You know, because for most folks, they've, at least around here anyway, they've had major portions of their lives that they've invested in whatever they've been invested in.
Yeah.
And now suddenly that particular thing has been removed. So what do you do to fill that gap, I guess?
Yeah.
And so I am still in that process of trying to figure out, okay, so Al, what are you going to do now?
So round appointments, and there's fewer of those, right?
Yeah.
Yes, although this next week will be a real busy week. So, and I'm still, once a month, I still get 7 days of chemo.
Okay.
My last one's coming up end of September. 7 days in a row. So.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
well,
Yeah.
I have a blood, bone marrow aspiration coming up next week, in fact, on Monday.
Okay.
And that'll be the determining factor where they will actually be able to see into the actual marrow itself, how things are going. Are the same. I mean, the reason why I got the transplant was because of the cells, the bad cells that I have or had. Are they still there? And to what extent? And so whatever we see in that particular process will give us some clues as to what's going to be happening in the future.
So I gotta imagine through all this, and I know you only share to whatever you want, but I know of emails that you've sent to both Ty and Tyler, and you're still watching. You know, you stream online, and you're also studying the Greek too.
Trying.
So I imagine, I mean, what's the connection for you as you are experiencing this with Jody, whether it's isolation for 100 days or the ongoing day in and day out? I mean, how has God shown up for you? And have you been surprised in the ways that he's shown up, or has he not shown up in ways you would have imagined? I mean, it's a loaded question, but I can only imagine it's been a lot.
It's to some extent, and I don't know how this is true or how much this is true or not, but to a large extent, you know, my relationship with God has been tied in so closely with my my career that to some extent the two are intertwined. And so being not quite so much in that teacher mode, that particular aspect of my life is now a little bit different. And so I'm still transitioning insofar as my relationship with God is concerned. I find myself once again every day I do my prayers, and of course with the Greek I need to be careful, because if all you do is do Greek, and at least for me anyway, if all I do is do Greek in my studies of the Bible, then it becomes more of a factual experience, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so my skills with Greek are not such that I can really do the Greek and be careful, and to some extent work with the Greek and make that devotional as opposed to technical, I guess, for lack of a better term. As a linguist, I guess, more than a theologian. Not even. I don't like that term. Sorry, but not as a believer. There we go.
Yeah. It is hard once you kind of have that technical knowledge to not just dive right into that.
How do you turn it off?
I don't know. My professor has said that the reason that one of his encouragements for learning biblical Greek is to be able to kiss the word without a veil, is the kind of metaphor they use. Because that's what the English translation is. It's almost like a veil. They're great. The English translations are great and trustworthy. But he used the analogy of on your wedding day, as with your bride. You know, you're not going to kiss your bride with the veil still over her face. You know, and so that's kind of what the hope is when you learn it for that way. But I'm sure it's really difficult to do that. And so he even himself, when he does his devotional time, never reads from the Greek, just because it becomes too much of an exercise.
I guess you find what works. Yeah.
I think the one. Sorry. Get back to the really on the state.
No, go wherever you want.
It's been hard. I'll be honest with you. It's been hard. I feel blessed because the folks here have supported me wonderfully. Jody has supported me, and but there have been times when I kind of trying to figure out where does this all go from here.
How can the questions of the doubts that arise, I'm sure, or and the frustrations, and where does God fit into all of that? Especially when you're experiencing it in real time. It's going to be easier, I'm sure, as time moves on, for you to look back and see, okay, there's maybe where God was, because I think that hindsight tends to help people with that. It's helped me at least. But in the moment, those questions are really pertinent and difficult to kind of wrestle with.
Well, and anytime there's this timeline, so you had said at one point, without the infusion, it would have been a year and a half.
I'd be dead.
Yeah.
Wow.
So every day, you know, you and Jody, you're always wrestling with your mortality. I guess we all are, but you're ever aware of it. And so at that point, is that still something that's turned on right now for you? It's like, okay, I have this much time. Is that how you view things? Or if I can be so bold to ask how that is changing in your mind?
You know, in most traditional societies, just in my studies and things that I've learned, I've seen that there's a real sense of, at least in ancient Greece anyway, there's a real sense of you have been given this amount of time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. You can yell, you can scream, you can fight, you can try and run away from it. But as we saw in the story of Oedipus, when you try and run away from it, you only end up running into it. Mm. And so basically, it's sort of a fatalistic perspective. I know I'm going to be here as long as I'm supposed to be here. And it's not going to be any more than that. It's not going to be any less. And it's sort of scary sometimes, but also it's very comfortable to know that I've got what I've got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Al. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Just to be able to sit and I mean, to trust God in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's hard to actually do that. It's easier to say than it is to do, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really good perspective.
I know, I almost feel like when death comes up in my mind, I'm just like, I don't think about it as much for myself, but when it's people I love, it's like, gosh, if there was a timeline put on their life, or when there is, you just I feel angry, and that's where I'm like so challenged. But it's like, you know, I haven't had a doctor tell me, you know, something specific like you've been dealing with too. So just talking about death itself is, that is scary, but it's so natural. So I appreciate you talking about it, because it's emotional on very different levels.
And for you guys in particular, I don't remember how old you are. I'm 69 now. And folks who are older, we've had the opportunity to go through some of the things that y'all have yet to go through. Mm-hmm. And I mean that in the sense of I really want you to be able to do those things.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say that I'm at peace about it, but I have to say that I've done so many incredible things that when it's my time to go, it'll be my time to go, and I'm okay with that, I guess. It's you can get upset about it if you want. It ain't going to do a whole lot of good.
Write an angry letter. In a different language. Maybe
there you go.
These ideas, where do you send it?
Write a letter to God. Which language am I going to use for this one?
Yeah. One that nobody else could, I mean, very few people would be able to translate it. Just between you and God.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, I was just thinking this morning, it seems to me, like I told you, my great-grandmother's from Denmark. And it seems to me that before my mom moved down to Phoenix, she and my dad, after my dad retired from the Marine Corps in 72, and when I first moved up here in 72 to go to Seattle Pacific, they were living on a farm just outside of Port Townsend. And Mom lived there until about 9-10 years ago, something like that. Anyway, so they were there a long time. But they went through some of the materials, and they had run across a letter from or to my great-grandmother in Danish.
Oh, wow.
And so at that moment, I tried to look at it.
That's special.
Well, it's special, but I couldn't do anything.
Because it was smudged, or the language itself?
Well, part of it is the written language. Handwriting in other languages sometimes, especially as of about 100 years ago, handwriting, especially like for instance in German, can be very difficult to read. Not so much because the handwriting is sloppy, but it's just that the way that they do their characters
is different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Exactly. And once you get the hang of it,
Yeah.
okay. Anyway, my great-grandmother, my Danish was very minimal to begin with, but her handwriting was also difficult to figure out, to understand.
And you have that today, though. You have her letters.
I was actually going to call my mom this morning, in fact, or today, and ask her about that letter, if she remembered it, and if she still has it, in which case at some point I will hopefully, Lord willing, be able to get that.
Yeah.
I think about that, like, what are the generations going to really hold on and be like, oh, this was my great-grandmother's. Like, well, that was a beautiful Facebook post or a tweet/X, like, whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, as you look through these, what do you call them, ephemera or artifacts? I mean, what seems to be something that will hold weight years from now, where people will say, that was special and unique, and this, therefore, belongs?
It's hard to do that with objects. It's unless those particular objects have a very close tie with an individual, an actual physical. Can I use that term? Yeah, sure. Physical individual.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's the relationship that you had with that individual that's tied in with that particular object that makes it valuable and carries memories. Now, there's also then, of course, just the whole idea of being able to read a letter that my great-grandmother dealt with and to understand better some of the things that she was going through.
Yeah.
Of course, that would be wonderful, and to understand better as well. So I'm not sure if I answered your question or
No,
not.
it was. I go on tangents also.
Yeah.
Also,
I'm okay with that.
it's great. We'll loop back somewhere. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
That is an interesting question, because I think I am always thinking in terms of keeping things or doing things that maybe will make a benefit for
Like a legacy
my
or-
great grandchildren. So like my parents, when I was 21, bought me a Bible. Even though they weren't Christians, I had given my Bible to my brother, so they were like, let's buy him another one. And it's this big ESV that has each page has a blank page next to it.
Oh, wow.
For notes.
Yeah.
And I've never written in it because I'm so afraid of writing terrible notes
And
that
people
my
seeing
great
it.
grandkids later will read, and like I'll give them bad information. But like I
Because
do,
if it's on the page.
if it's on the page,
I see.
but so I've kind of I've or like when I write in a journal, I'm always thinking like, okay, if somebody finds this.
Isn't that funny?
But
Yeah.
sometimes I also try to remove that. Like I'm just going to write. If
Yeah.
somebody finds it, who cares?
Yeah.
But I think part of it's just how connected I've been to some of these older theologians, like Edwards, for example. I mean, they have a lot of his sermon notes, or Spurgeon's notes and that kind of thing. And people are reading them and selling them online. I don't think I'm ever going to be like those, as influential as those two men, but I think because of that, the fact that people are still finding those useful or interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Totally.
okay, how do I make sure that I'm saying good things? But they probably didn't ever think that anybody was going to read their notes anyways. So
So interesting.
yeah,
I know language has changed, right? And you were thinking, and so you can speak to.
Oh, no,
It's
I'm
fun.
just, I'll go there sometimes.
yeah,
But language itself, I feel like people were so, well, you spoke on Edwards.
Yeah.
It seemed like everybody could formulate these beautiful letters, and that's just what they were doing.
Well,
Well.
be careful.
yeah,
Because, there are folks in all cultures and all histories of cultures who are, in fact, very well educated
Yeah.
and who can do those kinds of things.
Right.
Sure.
That does not mean that the whole of the society around
Right,
them was
thank you.
equally
Yeah,
as
that's
You're
educated.
right.
Yeah.
You're right.
yeah. It does always baffle me though when I read like catechisms from the 17th century that were written, like the Heidelberg Catechism, for example, it was written for children. And you read it today, and there are some there are plenty of adults, even and myself included, that when I read that I go, okay, what are they trying to say here? Like some of the formulations are unique, and obviously they mostly are for children of educated families, and so that plays a role. But yeah, there is something to be said about the way that language has shifted so much, even in just a lot, like you said, the last 100 years, and the way that we think about language. We become more literate necessarily as a country, but the way that we use the written language or the spoken language has very much changed from at least what we have from that time, from 100 years ago.
And to some extent, once again, there are the folks like, I'm going to say us, who are fairly well educated and who in fact have a fairly good command of the language and also of the written, not only the spoken language, but also the written language.
Yeah.
And so we tend to put our language in as we know it and as we are taught to do it. And so there are other folks who are less educated, and number one, they tend not to be writing stuff quite as much.
That's true, yeah.
And the language that they use, of course, is the kind of language that they are familiar with.
Yeah.
And then that's where you get guys like Mark Twain, for instance, who when he writes Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and stuff, he uses the language that he was around him, even though he himself was a very well-educated man.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting how that takes its shape. And you don't even realize it when you're doing it, that the reason you sound the way that you do is you've been formed by teachers that you've had, the way your parents spoke and or grandparents spoke.
What you can't say.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, too true.
So do you write also?
No, not very much.
Okay.
I try, but no.
You're a reader more so then?
To some extent, although I have to be honest with you, here recently I have done a very poor job of doing even reading, trying to get back to it. Towards the end of my teaching career, I wasn't reading as much.
Yeah.
And being an English teacher, of course, I had certain books that I would use to teach my students, and so I got to be pretty familiar with them.
Yeah.
But just reading for myself and reading because what stuff that I want to read is stuff I want to read.
Yeah.
I'm only just now starting to get back to that.
Is there a book that you would assign to your students in high school that you feel is one of those books that, because everybody has these lists, I think, but it's one of those books that you think maybe almost anybody should read?
Yeah.
Or a couple of those?
Everybody should read. Let's see. There's probably several books that are like that, and one of the main ones that are sticking to my brain just because here recently I've just been dealing with it a lot is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. Are you familiar with either Le Guin or with?
I'm not.
Nope.
Yeah.
Actually, Ursula Le Guin was a science fiction writer. She's dead now. She lived down in Portland. Yeah. If you feel like we need to move in order to get out of the sunshine, just let me know.
It's
okay?
beautiful. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I got the hat. Don't forget, you can use that if you need
thank
it. Anyway, and I promise I don't have lice. Let's see. Anyway, the book is called The Left Hand of Darkness, and Ursula Le Guin, and it's really good. It's a good book.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
I'll leave that there.
I know. I'd love to get a syllabus from you for the post graduate.
For the post. Well, again, bear in mind, I have very limited stuff that I deal with: science fiction and to some extent ancient Greek. To some extent, not even all that good.
Well, you have almost you swap between in your email signature.
Yeah.
Between Don Quixote
Mm-hmm.
and the Iliad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have which of those do you enjoy more?
I have never read Don Quixote.
Oh, you haven't? Okay,
Nope.
You just like that quote.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And it turns out that, of course, I don't know if you're familiar with the musical Man of La Mancha.
No,
Oh.
I've heard of it.
No, it
but-
came up in my classes, but I don't know enough
Ah.
to say anything on it right now.
Well,
but,
there's a song in the musical,
Huh.
and it's called "To Dream the Impossible Dream." And that phrase that you see on some of my emails is actually the original statement that Don Quixote makes in the book, and it was taken over from the book into the musical. And so
Interesting.
it's called "To Dream the Impossible Dream." You can look, it's a wonderful song,
Huh.
and the
good.
words that he sings are actually, in fact, well, English translation, of course, but
From the
are in
novel.
fact the words that Don Quixote says.
Oh, that's great. Stage
Yeah.
adapted.
Yeah,
Well, you never
there
know
you
what's
go.
going to reach
So-
somebody.
And now I do hope you go home and listen because it's a
I
wonderful
might.
song.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to do that. Yeah, the book. I'm gonna have to just remind me of the book again. The name.
The left something.
The
what'd you
left
say?
Oh,
hand.
The Left Hand of Darkness.
Last Hand of Darkness. Yeah, because I'm trying to find new
Literature.
new literature. I've never been a literature guy.
Ah.
I read Harry Potter when I was young.
Yeah.
read it all. I think I finished the 7th book by the time I was in 5th grade. And then like Watership Down was another book that I read when I was in middle school. But and there's no way I fully understood it, so I'm gonna have to go back and read that again. And the ones that were required for class, like To Kill a Mockingbird and those.
Yeah.
But I don't, or like I remember I read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Oh.
I don't remember any of the main plots of these books. But because then I got really into just nonfiction. And then now it's like I feel like I'm only reading theology books, which is good, but I really want to. Tyler's really encouraged me because he's such a he's so poetic in the way that he thinks and writes, and he's such a good writer. And I think it's because he's such a good reader. And he doesn't just read theology books; he reads literature.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get into that, and so I'm always looking on the look for.
Yeah, I think it was talking to
styles.
Justin a couple weeks back.
Yeah?
Justin Sherritt, because he
Yep.
was into Russian lit for a time,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
We were
my.
talking about that. Yeah. I know. Did you dabble in Russian
Nope.
ever? Or
Nope.
didn't you- Okay.
Nope.
German.
Nope. No Slavic
But
language.
those are some books, right?
They
The
are.
novels, I
Oh,
should
mercy.
say. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think I'm on the Brothers Karamazov.
Okay.
I think I just now got into book 2, and it's been like 2 months.
Okay. You're getting through it.
I'm getting through it.
Plugging through it. Yeah.
10 minutes a day is all about.
And I'm
all I can
slowly
handle.
working through Anna Karenina.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there you
Oh
go.
golly, yeah,
Oh, my
you guys
goodness.
are doing the Russian. Okay, good for you.
We all need to have a book study.
We
It'll
do.
lead us
Yeah.
through, but you
Yeah.
have read the Iliad, right? Is what you
Oh
said.
yeah, I used to teach the Iliad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, I've read it. I actually, in my Greek studies, of course, we did some readings from
Oh,
the Iliad
wow.
as
Yeah.
well. So
That's cool.
yeah,
And that's classical Greek, so it's a little different than
it's a little bit more, a
Yeah.
little bit more
rich.
so,
Yeah. Well,
a little more structural and
Yeah.
uses some of the more kinds of language that would be structural.
yeah.
Structural.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to ask, we may have touched on passions, but one of the guiding questions is, passions and how it might intersect with faith. I don't know if there's anything else outside of what we've talked about, that you would like to share, that you are passionate about, or that you have found in your life to be life-giving, insert whatever word you want in there, and how that might intersect with faith in some capacity.
There are things that I like to do, and they're important to me. The term passionate might be just a little bit too strong. And part of the reason for that is because I learned a long time ago that there are some things that you can get carried away with, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'd rather focus in on things that I enjoy and enjoy doing. And we've already talked about those, talked about running, talking about languages and literature to some extent, too.
Yeah. I imagine running in some sense does connect. There's got to be some faith component there, in the sense that you're running in nature often, and we've talked with a lot of people that have kind of mentioned somebody mentioned the idea of feeling small,
Yeah.
and they really appreciated that being in
The
nature.
Dursts.
The Dursts, yeah.
Jason.
Whereas, I don't know. Whenever I exercise, I'm not a runner. I tried to run earlier this year, and I could maybe run for like 10 minutes, and I'd be done. My body's not built for it.
Yeah.
But when I exercise, I think about this too. Like, the fact that I have the ability to do what I'm doing is a gift from God. And I try to. I can actually it's almost a way of worshiping and glorifying
Your whole body.
in the actual act, even though oftentimes I don't look like I'm worshiping when I'm lifting weights.
No,
But I don't know if you kind of feel that same thing with running.
well, for me, especially because quite often I run in the mornings.
Yeah.
Not always, but usually when I'm running in the mornings, it becomes my prayer time, my
Yeah.
devotional time, which
Yeah.
I don't know how good that is, theologically speaking,
No,
but
yeah.
it's a good way to start the day.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the Eugene Peterson's phrases about Sabbath, he uses prayer and play. That's kind of
Yes.
what it is. And it's prayer and recreation,
Yeah.
or recreation.
Recreation.
And that's what the Sabbath is. It doesn't have to be you're just a solitude person and you're not speaking. It's not, for me, that was necessary at times to actually rest, was to be quiet. As many people in church know, I can be quite verboten. anyways, I mean, like that is a great time for just prayer.
Yeah.
Because you're silent other than your heavy breathing.
Uh-huh.
Or if you're listening to music, but
Which is meditative too.
It is very
Yes, it
meditative.
is.
Because you're just putting one foot in front of the other, or you're trying to at least. And,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Yep.
good. That's cool.
Well, Al, I don't know. Yeah, we miss you. We would all love to see you, but we also know that there's a lot in between now and when you're here regularly on a Sunday. So usually what we ask is if someone were to see you in the Narthex, which someday they will, again, here and there, or when they interact with you,
Yeah.
you know, how would another conversation be started up? You know, what could they talk to you about, or something they might say to really spark some segue into conversation?
Let's see. I would just ask them how they doing and how life is going right now. That's enough. I try and stay away from discussions about language and stuff like that, just because most folks really don't care that much. I mean, it's
so
interesting.
You enjoy talking about it, but you don't want to burden others? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just like my, my studies of Greek are something that I do, and I love doing it, and I enjoy doing it. But I also know that can, especially in a church, that kind of stuff can be just a little bit overwhelming or impressive in and of itself, and I don't want that. I would rather be a guy who's sitting on the pew.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure how to answer your
That was a
question.
great answer. And is it
That's
okay if, I know people ask how you're doing because we're all concerned. Is that fine
Sure.
too?
Of course. Yeah.
What's
By the
the
same
stage
token,
for?
when I came back, I was sort of wondering, gosh, should I get up in front and just tell everybody how I'm doing? But didn't do that, and so now I'm just showing up, and folks come up and talk to me if they want, and I'm okay, and I'll talk with them, and that's okay.
We'd also love to give you that time if you would rather just get up there and
Yeah.
give one report, and that would be easier.
I would leave that for somebody else to make that decision, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, it has been great to see you back in the sanctuary the last couple of Sundays. And I remember there was one, I think I was talking to Jody one Sunday, must have a couple of weeks ago, and we were just kind of talking about where you guys were at and the fact that you were coming up on your 1-year anniversary of the transplant, and that you were kind of still hesitant about being in the sanctuary with that many people and that kind of thing. And then you showed up that morning, and she kind of points at me. She goes, "He's here," which was, and it was pretty cool. It was kind of a fun little moment. We were both surprised, but yeah. So it's been a blessing to have you back, and
Thanks.
And I love this conversation.
I know.
There's so many other
Yeah,
things that
thank
we
you.
could have talked about. We say this after every episode.
Yes.
It seems.
Oh,
with
I'll
every
bet.
person.
I'll bet.
But the sound stuff. I know you haven't been back there in a while, but
yes.
the fact that was a big part of your service here.
I was trying, yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm sure we'd love to have you back there again. I know it's a new board, but I'm sure you.
I have talked to Kalen,
Yeah.
asked him, be happy to learn.
Yeah.
And I think he would teach me. It's
Yeah,
more
he
a matter of just gotta be there.
Yeah. But yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.